Mass protests hit daily average of 500 across the nation. On the morning of February 2nd, Xi Jinping, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, visited the Pingjin Battle Memorial and emphasized the importance of cherishing the hard-won red land to those accompanying him. Observers suggest that this reflects Xi's concern about potential losses as Chinese society faces increasing unrest. Xi Jinping is currently grappling with significant challenges due to Evergreen's collapse. What will become of the 6 million owners of incomplete homes? The stock market is in decline, with an average of 500 mass protests occurring daily as people demand the overthrow of the Communist Party and Xi Jinping himself. Taiwan's Central Broadcasting Station reported on February 2nd that mass protests in China have surged annually from several thousand to at least 100,000, estimating about 500 protests happening every day. Jean Kailu, an associate professor at FO Guam University's Department of Public Affairs, highlighted that incidents surged from 8,700 in 1993 to 10,000 the next year, reaching 60,000 by 2003 and surpassing 90,000 by 2009. The 2013 Blue Book suggests these incidents could number in the hundreds of thousands each year. The party's efforts to quell public dissent and maintain social and regime stability suggest it's grappling with significant internal and external security threats, necessitating vast investments in defense and public monitoring. This authoritarian approach has only heightened social tensions, demonstrating that the friction within the populace is more severe than that with external adversaries. The worker rights uprising of 2023, China's unyielding protests rocked the CCP's foundations. Data from China Labor Bulletin indicates a nation in turmoil, with a staggering 741 cases of worker rights violations in the first half of the year, ballooning to a jaw-dropping 1,178 in the following months. Across cyberspace, echoes of relentless unrest reverberate through December 2023. This chaos isn't contained, it's erupting with fury in every corner, with Guangdong province seizing the ignominious crown for factory labor disputes. Brace yourself for the seismic shockwaves of China's worker rights revolution. CLB's latest report, detailing a gut-wrenching 1,919 incidents as of December 27, shatters all previous records. Yet, this revelation barely scratches the surface of the rampant discontent. Since the late 2022 pandemic lockdown lift, a tidal wave of worker rights violations has surged. The layoffs at Chongqing Zhongyuan Huiji Biotechnology Company on January 8, triggered by canceled orders, ignited protests and violent clashes involving an estimated 20,000 workers. Simultaneously, on January 7, in Chongqing Deduku, layoffs at Zhongyuan Huiji pharmaceutical factories sparked widespread outrage and violent confrontations. Within a day, hundreds from Hangzhou Aodai Biotechnology Company rallied, decrying wage cuts and layoffs, culminating in a defiant march to the local government offices. Throughout the year, workers' fury has raged unabated. By December 2023, protests for labor rights had become an all-too-common occurrence. From December 19 to 22, over 2,000 workers took to the streets in Dezhou, Shandong Province. The closure of Yangmei Puwang Chemical Company, a state-owned enterprise subsidiary, left 2,500 people jobless. But instead of a proper layoff plan, the company opted for wage cuts and unpaid leave, further stoking the flames of discontent. On December 27, in Shenyang, Liaoning, employees of the state-owned China Communications Second Navigation Bureau Municipal Construction Company rose up to demand their unpaid wages. On December 24 and 25, the bankruptcy of Shanghai's B.Y.D supermarket fueled the fury of 800 employees protesting against an unjust compensation plan. From December 22 to 24, in Yongji City, Shanxi, over 900 workers from the bankrupt Yongji Chemical Fertilizer Plant, a subsidiary of the state-owned China National Agrochemical Corporation, staged relentless protests both inside and outside the factory, demanding fair settlements. On December 19, a collective act of desperation over wage disputes unfolded at Yingsai Hardware Products Company in Dongguan, Guangdong. The root cause of this massive worker rights uprising undoubtedly lies in the inevitable collapse of the entire Chinese economy, a stark reality that cannot be ignored. As private enterprises fold under state pressure, the CCP's ruthless crackdown on industries only serves to exacerbate the situation, eroding trust and stifling domestic investment. State-owned enterprises, corrupted by power and greed, have left nothing but devastation in their wake. Mass layoffs have pushed the social security system to its breaking point, driving countless individuals to fight tooth and nail for their basic rights to survival. In mainland China, this recent surge in worker activism, perhaps the most potent and widespread to date, speaks volumes about the dire state of affairs, widespread poverty, shattered dreams, and an urgent cry for fair wages and dignified work. Concealment of protest massacre statistics, CCP's infuriating secrecy. The 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre and the figures from the CCP have never been officially disclosed. The Tiananmen Square incident of 1989 remains a poignant symbol of China's quest for democracy and human rights. Peaceful calls for political reform were met with brutal government crackdown, revealing the regime's intolerance for dissent. Despite global condemnation, the CCP's refusal to acknowledge or address the events perpetuates grief and injustice. The massacre underscores the regime's prioritization of power over citizens' aspirations, serving as a stark reminder of authoritarian oppression. International advocacy continues for accountability and change, highlighting the ongoing struggle for human rights in China. There are various figures regarding the casualties of the Tiananmen Square incident. According to the Chinese Red Cross, the death toll ranges from 2,600 to 3,000. On June 16 of that year, the U.S. Consulate General in Hong Kong shared information obtained from internal documents of the PRC government, which stated that from June 3 to 4, there were 8,726 people killed in Tiananmen Square and Xi'an Avenue. From June 3 to 9, the outskirts of Tiananmen Square within Beijing had 1,728 people killed. Thus, the total death toll was 10,454, with 28,796 people injured. While Americans assert the reliability of their intelligence, there is currently no way to verify the information in these original documents. According to Hong Kong media, internal documents from the Southern Theater Command assess the casualties of the Tiananmen Square massacre and related details regarding the 27th Army Corps' heinous crimes, previously undisclosed. Next magazine reported that U.S. intelligence obtained through internal documents from the Southern Theater Command estimated the casualties of the Tiananmen Square massacre to be as high as 40,000 people, including 10,454 deaths. This evidence starkly contradicts the PRC government's public assertion to the international community that there were no deaths in the 1989 Tiananmen Square incident. 2012 to 2015 Feminist Movement. Since Xi Jinping assumed power in 2012, there has been a further decline in freedom of speech and opportunities for peaceful assembly. With increased online censorship and tighter control over non-governmental organizations under laws like the Overseas NGO Law, activists and civic groups have faced growing difficulties in organizing large-scale protests. Nevertheless, dissent persisted. A new wave of feminist activism emerged in 2012, characterized by street demonstrations and individual protests, sometimes involving only one participant. The Chinese government responded by systematically suppressing the feminist movement, including smearing and harassing activists, closing gender-related groups at universities, and censoring online discussions on gender issues. In 2015, authorities arrested and detained 5 prominent members of the movement. Despite these challenges, Chinese feminists continue their advocacy through offline activities and international engagement. Chinese JASIC workers battled lung diseases and CCP's compensation sums fail to make up for their losses. In 2018, the JASIC workers incident unfolded when employees at JASIC Technology, a Shenzhen-based welding equipment company, sought to establish a union. Shortly after, 3 workers were apprehended. Subsequent protests by students, labor activists, and sympathetic workers were met with arrests and intimidation. Numerous Marxist student organizations involved in the movement were either dissolved or compelled to regroup. Approximately 6 million Chinese citizens have succumbed to lung disease from inhaling metal-laden dust, Love saved pneumoconiosis. Outraged, hundreds of Hubei province workers took to the streets, demanding rightful compensation for their health woes. Although the Shenzhen government doled out some compensation, with the highest sum reaching 220,000 renminbi, it fell woefully short, decried Gu Fuxiang, a vocal advocate for the workers. As the battle for justice rages on nearly a decade later, Gu lamented, "We've sacrificed our lives for development. The government couldn't care less if we're sick or dead." China's explosive economic growth over the past 40 years has come at a staggering human cost. Shenzhen, surpassing Hong Kong in economic output in 2017, symbolizes this growth. However, behind the gleaming facades of its landmarks like the Shenzhen-Hong Kong high-speed railway station and the Ping'an International Finance Center lies the untold suffering of the workers who built them. Many of them resorted to borrowing money from all available sources to cover exorbitant medical expenses, in addition to providing for their families' education and livelihoods. Returning to Gu's harrowing ordeal, he had to borrow money from a rural lending organization to afford medical treatment. "They lent to me because my son has guaranteed repayment upon my passing," he revealed. Despite receiving a paltry sum of 130,000 renminbi in compensation from the Shenzhen government in 2009, Gu deemed it insufficient. "The issue isn't a lack of funds. Shenzhen has ample social security funds. It's an ideological problem," remarked Pun Nai, a sociology professor at the University of Hong Kong. The Shenzhen government, refusing responsibility, argues that the sick workers are not native to the city. To maintain social stability, the stories of suffering workers have been silenced. Beijing's heavy-handed intervention and intimidation tactics have prevented sick workers from speaking out, as officials ban news outlets from reporting on the plight of lung disease workers from Hubei. This censorship coincides with a broader trend of political suppression over the past 5 years. Despite 11 trips to Shenzhen in 2018, demanding compensation ranging from 500,000 to 1.1 million renminbi, the sick workers are still met with deafening silence from the government. For Gu, the greatest concern lies in the burden of debt he leaves for his descendants. "Our nation has surged forward in the past 4 decades, freeing farmers from backbreaking toil," he proudly yet wearily stated. "I wish I could explore the world instead of being bedridden. Unfortunately, my time on this earth is drawing to a close," he lamented, encapsulating the heartbreak and despair felt by countless suffering workers. Sympathizing with the workers' protests at JASIC Technology, young men and women, deeply imbued with the ideals of the Chinese Communist Party, are willing to demonstrate for better improvements for the workers, to better protect their lives. "You are the backbone of the working class," shouted one protester while speaking to workers at a factory. "We will stand in solidarity with you." The government quickly quashed the protest efforts of these young activists, arresting many of them and removing their calls for justice from the internet. However, these actions were too late, as information about the youth group's activities spread to many regions across the country, where there is discontent over increasing inequality, corruption, and materialism in Chinese society. Protests occur frequently in China, especially among workers, who have no support as they are not allowed to establish independent trade unions, have no independent courts, and have no independent media. But the protests in Huizhou, Shenzhen are unusual because they are organized by students at one of the country's top universities, while students have almost dared not protest since the bloody crackdown at Tiananmen Square in 1989. In the decades since the crackdown, university students have helped propagate the party's economic and political policies, focusing on themes of work, family, and other aspects of life while continuing to support the single-party political regime, or at least not touching on that issue. As economic growth slows, party leadership becomes increasingly concerned about the influence of the West on the younger generation, a generation that is more worldly and digitally connected than ever before, a concern that runs counter to the human progress of the Chinese Communist Party.